My ex-wife pretended to be admitted to a mental health ward for long-term treatment while actually staying with her new man and cheating on me. Imagine discovering the person you loved, the one you shared your life with, had taken deception to a whole new level. A level so twisted, it leaves you questioning everything you ever knew about them. That's exactly what happened to me when my ex-wife faked to stay in a mental health facility to hide the fact she was living with another man. This all started about 3 years ago. At the time, our marriage was already in a rough patch. We'd been together for almost 7 years, and, to be honest, we'd grown distant. The small, everyday conversations between us had started to fade, and even when we did talk, it was mostly surface-level stuff, nothing meaningful. I thought we were just in a phase. Every marriage has its ups and downs, right? But things took a strange turn when my ex-wife started mentioning that she wasn't feeling well mentally. At first, I was supportive. Mental health is important, and if she needed help, I was going to be there for her. We talked about therapy. I suggested taking time off work, anything she needed. Then one day, out of nowhere, she came to me and said she needed more than just therapy. She told me she had been talking to doctors and that they recommended she check herself into a mental health ward for long-term treatment. It hit me hard. I mean, my wife, someone I thought I knew inside out, was telling me she was struggling so much that she needed to be admitted for weeks, maybe even months. As much as it hurt, I wanted to be supportive. I didn't push back. I didn't ask too many questions. I just trusted her. I thought, if this is what she needs to get better, I'll be here when she comes back. So, off she went. She packed a bag, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and left. It was surreal. I spent the first few nights alone in the house, feeling this massive hole in my chest. I worried about her, hoping she was getting the care she needed. She would text occasionally, saying things like, "I'm not allowed to have my phone much, but I miss you," or, "The doctors say I'm making progress, but it's hard." I believed every word. Why wouldn't I? Weeks went by, and her messages became less frequent, but I figured it was part of the treatment. You know, maybe they were cutting her off from outside contact to focus on her recovery. It was lonely, but I held on to the thought that she'd come home eventually, healthier, happier, and ready to rebuild our marriage. But then, little cracks in her story started to appear. It began with something small, an Instagram post. I hadn't been checking social media much because it just reminded me of how empty the house felt, but one day I decided to scroll through my feed. And there it was. My wife had liked a post. That might not sound like a big deal, but it struck me as odd. Why would she have her phone out, scrolling Instagram, if she was in a mental health facility that supposedly restricted communication? I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe it was a brief moment of freedom, a reward or something. But the uneasy feeling stuck with me. So, I started paying closer attention, and that's when the messages from her became even more suspicious. Instead of sounding like someone going through intense therapy or treatment, they became vague, even distant. At one point, I asked her if I could visit, bring her something from home, or even just talk to one of the doctors for an update. She shut it down immediately. She said visits weren't allowed, that it would interfere with her progress. She even got angry with me for asking too many questions, claiming I didn't understand what she was going through. That was the moment my trust began to crumble. Something was off and I couldn't shake the feeling. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I started investigating. I know it sounds paranoid, but there was just too much that didn't add up. I contacted the hospital where she claimed to be admitted, hoping for some kind of confirmation. But guess what? They had no record of her. Not under her name. Not under any alias. Nothing. At first, I thought there had to be a mistake. Maybe she had checked into a different facility. Maybe it was under her maiden name. I called a couple of other places in the area. Same result. No one had heard of her. It was then that the reality of the situation started sinking in. She wasn't in any facility. She never had been. My mind raced, trying to figure out where she was and what she was doing. And then, almost as if the universe wanted to mock me, I stumbled upon the truth in the most painful way. One evening, a mutual friend, Someone who didn't know about the supposed mental health stay texted me out of the blue. She asked how things were going between me and my wife. I gave a vague response, saying my wife was away, not wanting to reveal too much. But that friend, she hit me with a bombshell. She casually mentioned seeing my wife out with some guy. She assumed it was nothing, maybe a coworker or a friend. But the way she described the situation, their closeness, the way they looked at each other, it was clear. This wasn't just some innocent meeting. My wife was with another man. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I didn't even have the words to respond. I just thanked her and immediately started digging. I went through her social media, and it didn't take long before I found out who the guy was. They hadn't been very discreet. It was clear she had been seeing him for months, probably even before she made up the whole mental health ward story. My heart sank. She had left me, her husband, with this elaborate lie about needing mental health treatment, all while shacking up with her new man. The deception, the cruelty of it all, it was overwhelming. I confronted her, of course. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I told her I knew everything. About the fake hospital stay, about her new boyfriend. And do you know what she said? She didn't even try to deny it. She just looked at me, completely cold, and said, "I didn't know how else to leave you." Those words hit me harder than anything. I had been loyal. I had supported her through every hardship, and instead of being honest, of giving me the respect of a straightforward breakup, she chose to lie, to manipulate me into thinking she was struggling with her mental health, just so she could cheat behind my back. We divorced shortly after, obviously. There was no way I could ever trust her again, and frankly, I didn't want to. The woman I thought I married had disappeared long ago, replaced by someone I didn't even recognize anymore. Looking back, I still can't wrap my head around how far she was willing to go with her lie. Faking a mental health crisis? That's a whole new level of heartlessness. But it taught me something important. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. And sometimes, the people we think we know the best are the ones who are capable of hurting us the most. So that's my story. I'm still picking up the pieces, but I've moved on. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that life is too short to waste on people who don't value your trust and honesty. And for those of you out there, be careful who you let into your life and never ignore those gut feelings. Because sometimes the truth is darker than you can imagine.